We are going to be listening here on a very sensitive program this morning. This is the anniversary, the 19th anniversary of 9/11. And to a lot of people, including myself, it is a very, very sensitive subject pertaining to what people actually witnessed, why they witnessed it, etc., etc. This particular morning, they're doing a show on the children that was down in Florida during the time that the President of the United States, the 43rd President, first heard of the attack going on during him talking to a bunch of, I guess it was kindergartners, a bunch of school kids down there during this process. So if you don't mind, because of the being a cautious moment, if you don't mind, we'd like to take a few minutes of your time on the anniversary, the 19th anniversary, and memorializing those who sacrificed so much that day pertaining to 9/11.
Welcome back. On this morning, 19 years ago, a group of school kids in Sarasota, Florida had quite a thrill. The President of the United States in their classroom. But we all know the world would change that day, and those kids and their teacher became witnesses to history. Now their stories are featured in a new documentary. It's called 9/11 Kids. Take a look.
Yeah, I remember we had to wake up extra early and get to school, and I just remember pulling up and it felt like a movie or something.
On September 11th, 2001, Dynasty Brown and her second grade classmates at Emma E. Booker Elementary School were waiting for a special visitor to join their reading class.
Okay, it was second graders. My apology. I didn't know for sure if it was kindergartners, or I just knew it had something to do with school children.
President George W. Bush was visiting the school to promote his nationwide education initiative. In the middle of reading to a class, President Bush was alerted of an attack on the World Trade Center in New York.
Something was bothering him, and it's kind of like he was in another world.
Sandra K. Daniels was the teacher in the classroom that day.
What happened? Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong?
Less than half an hour later, the president broke the news at a press conference at the school.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
19 years later, Daniels and Brown reflect on their shared experience that day.
They were carefree, innocent children. We went from
God bless the victims.
high emotions that morning to whoosh, low emotions.
I remember she was sitting behind her desk, like eyes bloodshot and crying, and seeing that was kind of like seeing your parents cry for the first time. You never see them weak. So very emotional.
Joining us this morning is the teacher of that second grade class, Sandra K. Daniels, former student Dynasty Brown. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Ms. Daniels, it's been 19 years since that day. You were the second grade teacher in that classroom that morning, and you said you noticed something was wrong when you saw that man whisper into President Bush's ear. How did the mood shift from there?
Well, I knew something was wrong because that was not supposed to happen. And the mood went from, we're having a great time, he's emotionally involved with the classroom, to him leaving us spiritually, mentally, and physically. He left the room. And I knew I had to continue teaching because I had my 16 students in front of me. I had the classroom full of cameras, and the president was there. But he left me, and I didn't know why.
Dynasty, you were one of the 16 students in the classroom that morning, only 7 years old at the time. Did you have any idea what was going on in that moment? Do you remember?
Not exactly, but kind of like she said, the energy just shifted in the room. So we knew something was wrong, and as a kid, you're very curious. So I'm keep looking up, I'm peeking because his face is completely different now. So the energy definitely shifted, but we didn't know exactly what was going on.
Ms. Daniels, this documentary, 9/11 Kids, it was shot over a year and a half period from 2018 to late 2019, following the lives of 6 out of those 16 students who were in that classroom that day. I know that the relationship between a teacher and a student is a special one. My mom was a teacher for almost 30 years. So how are the other students in your classroom from that day doing? How have their lives changed?
The other students in my classroom are doing well. They all went on their different paths and different journeys. I am in constant contact with them all the time. And even if time and years have separated or we haven't seen each other for a moment, the moment we do connect, it was like we never lost a beat. There is no time difference in us. Some have gone on to become entrepreneurs, as Dynasty is. Some are now in the armed forces. Some have their own businesses. Some are engineers, as Lazaro is. And I can go on. And then there were some that had hiccups on the road, but that's life. And we recover from hiccups, and I encourage them to get up and move forward.
Well, Dynasty, she just mentioned you're now 26 and a successful entrepreneur. How often do you think back to that day, and how has it impacted your life?
I never forget it. So honestly, always thinking back to that time, back to that day, and feeling this importance that I was a part of history. So I'm always so grateful, so appreciative that I had that moment, that Mrs. Daniels allowed me and chose me, to be in that room. So I'm always just so grateful for that. And honestly, it taught me in life to just always strive for greatness. It was my first kind of example that if you do good, you'll be rewarded and be put in certain situations.
Absolutely. Mrs. Daniels, finally, you're still teaching. You now teach 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. That's something. At Booker Middle School, and in conjunction with the film, I understand a scholarship fund has been set up to help students continue their academic journey.
Absolutely.
Before you leave us this morning, can you tell us about that scholarship?
I'll be more than happy to. We have established a Gwendolyn Tosay Rigel Scholarship that honors our principal at Emma E. Booker at the time, who is now passed on. And it is to help students that have attended Emma E. Booker, Booker Middle, and Booker High School continue or further their education. There are contributions that can be made to Booker High School with Gwendolyn Tosay Rigel's name attached to it. And she is the one, she is the reason President Bush came to our school. She told us this. She said, I'm going to take you all to the White House. And we looked at her and said, sure, Mrs. Rigel, yeah, right.
Wow.
And not only that didn't happen, what happened was she brought the White House to us.
He came to you.
And we are appreciative to her for that.
And lives were forever changed that day for sure. Thank you both so much for talking with us this morning. Such a pleasure. Again, the film is called 9/11 Kids. And I want people to know, if you want to learn more about that scholarship fund, you can head over to our website at thirdhourtoday.com.
Miss Daniels, still
And I like it. It's Miss Daniels.
Miss Daniels.
Don't call teachers by their first
No.
name. Ms. Daniels.
Miss Daniels.
We like
And the
that.
fact that she's still teaching in
Yes,
middle school, no less, it's a lot of work.
Just ahead and overheard on Third, we're going to talk about the NFL's historic night. Kickoff unlike any other on the field, the sidelines, and the stands. And then later, it's back to school, Superfood Friday. Joy Bauer going to put a spin on some classic lunches. Like
That's Ms. Joy Bauer.
That's right.
Miss
Ms.
Bauer.
Joy. Ms. Joy.
Miss
Mom, she thought it was a great idea, and we found a book agent, and we got my dream come true.
I bought the house next door to me, and then I bought one a block and a half up. So it's nice to have a lazy walk to work. Yeah. But this is so much fun.
New York City firefighters. Today we honor their extraordinary sacrifice and every first responder who keeps America safe. With us today is David D'Amato, a retired Chicago police officer and a current officer of the Navy Reserves. On 9/11, he drove from Chicago to Ground Zero. As David says, while the sights and smells of working at Ground Zero will forever be etched in my mind, what is more profound is the way this country came together afterwards. The police officers and firemen were revered as the heroes they truly are. The military was appreciated in a manner not seen in decades, and common people found new meaning in values like friendship, kindness, and selflessness. Thank you, David. Such beautiful words, and thank you to every member of law enforcement who risks their lives to ensure our safety and uphold our peace. This morning, we also remember the 183 people who were killed in the attack on the Pentagon and the remarkable service members who crawled straight through the raging blaze to rescue their comrades. We express our undying loyalty to the nearly 6 million young men and women who have enlisted in the United States Armed Forces since September 11th, 2001. More than 7,000 military heroes have laid down their lives since 9/11 to preserve our freedom. No words can express the summit of their glory or the infinite depth of our gratitude. But we will strive every single day to repay our immeasurable debt and prove worthy of their supreme sacrifice. America will never relent in pursuing terrorists that threaten our people. Less than 1 year ago, American warriors took out the savage killer and leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi. Soon after, our warriors ended the brutal reign of the Iranian butcher who murdered thousands of American service members. The world's top terrorist, Qasem Soleimani, is dead. Here in Shanksville, this community locked arms and hearts in the wake of tragedy. With us today is Chuck Wagner, a heavy equipment operator who lives just a few miles away. Very soon after the attack, Chuck helped search for the black box. He was so changed by what he experienced that he joined with several members of his church to become what they call ambassadors for the 40 men and women on Flight 93. Chuck and his neighbors learned about each person, cared for their families, and each day, rain or shine, they took shift standing vigil over their final resting place. Long before this place was a national memorial, back when it was marked by a simple wooden cross, Chuck and his fellow ambassadors were always here waiting to tell visitors about those we lost. 19 years later, Chuck says his life is devoted to three things: his family, his church, and preserving the memory of the men and women of Flight 93. To Chuck, his wife Jane,
Amen. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. To Chuck and his wife Jane, thank you so much for being here. And to the over 40 ambassadors with us today, please stand and receive America's thanks. And this is a very deep thanks, please. Thank you very much. Also with us is Marine veteran Jason Thomas from Long Island. On September 11th, Jason had just retired from the Marines, but he immediately put back on his uniform and raced into the nightmare of ash and debris. At Ground Zero, he found a fellow Marine, Dave Carnes. Together they began to call out, "United States Marines, United States Marines." If you can hear us yell, tap, do whatever you can do with the United States Marines. Soon they heard a shout for help. Two police officers were trapped beneath 20 feet of rubble. Jason and Dave dug for hours on end, knowing that at any moment the wreckage could come down on them, crushing them alive. At one point, someone told Jason to stop. Jason replied, "I'm a Marine. I don't go back, I go forward." That day, Jason helped save the lives of those two officers. For years, Jason said nothing about what he did on 9/11. He did not even tell his 5 children. But when he saw a rescue recounted on TV, he decided to meet those officers. One of them gave him a gift, a steel cross made from a beam that Jason helped lift to free them from the hell on earth. As Jason said about the cross, it means a lot. It's a symbol of what we are as Americans, because that day we all came together and stood as a nation, as Americans. It didn't matter what race you were, what religion you were. It didn't matter. We all came together to help one another. I die for this country. I die for this country. Jason, thank you very much for bearing witness to the character of our nation. Jason, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason. The men and women of Flight 93 were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives. Nothing could have prepared them for the dreadful events of that morning. But when the moment came, when history called, they did not hesitate. They did not waver. 40 towering patriots rose up, took charge, made their stand, turned the tide, and changed the course of history forever. Our sacred task, our righteous duty, and our solemn pledge is to carry forward the noble legacy of the brave souls who gave their lives for us 19 years ago.
Yes.
In their memory, we resolve to stand united as one American nation, to defend our freedoms, to uphold our values, to love our neighbors, to cherish our country, to care for our communities, to honor our heroes, and to never, ever forget. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the heroes of Flight 93. God bless all of the families. 9/11, we'll never forget. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Never forget. The message from President Trump, never forget those heroes that he is honoring today in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. As you heard the president, accompanied by the First Lady there in PA, honor those who gave their lives, honor the people who helped save lives on that day 19 years ago. We are about to see the president and the First Lady lay a wreath in honor of those victims. We're going to bring that to you when it happens. And for the rest of the remembrances here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We've also been covering the remembrances in New York, in Lower Manhattan at the 9/11 Memorial, and we're about to hear from Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Senator Harris in Fairfax, Virginia. As we wait for those events to happen, I want to bring back in Carol Lee at the White House and presidential historian and MSNBC contributor John Meacham, as you can see the scene from Virginia there. Carol, your thoughts on the president? This is a similar speech to one that we've heard him deliver on 9/11 anniversaries in the past.
Yeah, it is, Hallie, and this tone was similar to what we've heard from him on 9/11 anniversaries in the past. A very somber president, dramatically different from the tone that we've heard from the president on other days, in recent days and weeks. But he spent a lot of time really focusing on honoring first responders, the victims of 9/11, their families, members of the military, and then generally had a message of unity, which is not something we've heard recently from the president. He talked about the way to honor those who died on 9/11 is by remaining a united nation and, defending our freedoms, upholding our values, loving our neighbors. These are not always sort of things that we hear the president say, but clearly he's taking a pause and honoring the victims of 9/11 and the families on what is usually and always has been since for the last 19 years a very somber day, Hallie.
And you can see the president in Shanksville getting ready for that wreath-laying ceremony. We're going to watch him perform this ceremony along with the First Lady and take a moment of silence there in Shanksville. Let's listen in. President Trump there honoring the victims from Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. In Fairfax, Virginia, Senator Kamala Harris is also marking this 9/11 anniversary. We want to listen into what she has to say now.
Hug and hold each other. Perfect strangers. Understanding at our core without reflection, without thinking about it, that we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And as we honor and remember those who sacrificed so much, who ran in harm's way to protect people they'd never met, to stand strong, as we honor their memories these 19 days later, let us also remember that honoring them is also about reminding us of who we are as Americans. Because in times of tragedy, in times of despair, in times of suffering and pain, we, by our very nature as who we are, we stand together. We stand together, understanding we are all in this together. And so as we honor them, let's remember that about who we are as a nation. And I want to thank Chief Butler for bringing us together. My deepest thanks, of course, to our active duty military, our veterans, and our military families for their service. And to all the first responders here today. My brother-in-law is a firefighter in California. And it is personal to me, as well as Mark said, throughout my career, part of my life's work, to stand with each of you. And I thank you for the sacrifice that you are prepared to make every day you walk out of your homes. And the sacrifices your family makes when they bid you off as you go, wearing that uniform, while they say a silent prayer that you will come home at the end of your shift. I thank you all for the work you do. And I know I speak for everyone here and millions more when I say we are so deeply proud of you and eternally grateful for your sacrifice and for your courage. And it is a pleasure, Chief. You told us that some of the heroes from that day 19 years ago are still right here serving this community. And I thank you on behalf of all of us for the consistency of your dedication to your country. So today we honor those lost in New York, Pennsylvania, and right here in Virginia. We remember the passengers and crew members, the firefighters, law enforcement, peace officers, and military personnel. We remember that they were more than victims of an unspeakable act. They were also parents, and sons and daughters, and neighbors, and friends. And we know that they will never be defined by the story of those who stole them away. No, they will be defined by their humanity, by their stories, by their laughter that still echoes in the homes and hearts of those who love them. What our attackers fail to understand is that the darkness they hoped would envelop us on 9/11 instead summoned our most radiant and defined human instincts. The instinct to care for one another, to transcend our divisions and see ourselves as fellow citizens, to race toward danger and risk everything to protect each other, the instinct to unite. If we learned anything watching the heroes of 9/11, it's that the strength of the human spirit knows no bounds, and that even the gravest threats against us only serve to reveal our true strength, that our capacity to act with love and courage in the face of immense challenge is what defines us as Americans. I'm humbled to be here and to join in this moment, and I wish and I pray that the cherished memory of those who served reminds us both of who they were as individuals, but also of who we are as a nation. Thank you for including me in today's ceremony. May God bless their memories and our troops and the United States of America. Thank you.
You have been listening to Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Senator Kamala Harris speak at a 9/11 remembrance ceremony in Fairfax, Virginia. Her remarks coming after we heard from the president in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and after an event this morning in Lower Manhattan to commemorate the victims of 9/11. These events look a little different this year. The seats are socially distanced. You can see the speakers in masks. COVID-19 adding to the difficult reality facing so many of our 9/11 heroes today. First responders and survivors are at higher risk of serious illness and death from the coronavirus, many of them coping with long-term or lifelong respiratory illnesses, including lung cancer, asthma, COPD. The World Trade Center Health Program telling us nearly 1,500 responders and survivors have already fought the coronavirus, with nearly 200 needing hospitalization, 44 dying from it. The 9/11 Victim Compensation Funds responding with a new update this week, too. Those who have died from coronavirus, their families are now potentially eligible for the fund based on some of those underlying conditions. Joining me now is one of those two-time survivors, John Feal. He was a demolition supervisor at Ground Zero who spent 11 weeks in the hospital at the time, and this spring he survived another close call from COVID. John, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm humbled to be here, especially on a day where this is a somber day. This is a day of remembrance and reflection, and anything short of not talking about those we lost that day, then we failed. My heart bleeds for those families that lost loved ones on that horrific day, and you know, I survived getting injured on 9/17/01, and I'm never going to be the same. And I survived COVID and pneumonia in March, and I know I'll never be the same. And I'm lucky, I'm blessed. But there are thousands of people that are suffering still 19 years later, and then add the pandemic on top of that. You know, 9/11 is the longest day in the history of days. It hasn't ended, and we're still suffering as a nation. So when I see elected officials speak, and I want to believe they're being genuine and they're speaking from the heart, I wanted to ask them why it took so long to get legislation passed to help Americans, because the two don't equal up to me. And I'm not going to put on my advocacy hat today, but I'm putting on my humanity hat today. And I'm challenging everybody in D.C. and in the state capitals to ensure that the American people get treatment, protection, and hope and confidence that they're going to be taken care of if they get a 9/11 related illness, if they get COVID-19, and God forbid they get a legislation passed that will help them financially put food on the table.
keeping that humanity hat on, as you describe it, John. You talk about the many people who are still suffering 19 years later from 9/11, from the reverberations of that attack, the health issues, now with the coronavirus, as you talk about. You're talking about some of the needs that exist. What specifically do you want to see done to better help those who are still suffering 19 years after that day?
Well, I mean, we could do a better job in getting people in the World Trade Center Health Program and then helping them file a claim. I mean, we do that every day with limited resources. The federal government, the compensation part is run by the Department of Justice. They're doing a great job. The healthcare department is being run by NIOSH. You saw what happened yesterday when the story broke. And while today's not the day, they took money from the FDNY screening program. That's wrong on every level. You know, we need to do better. You know, on September 12th, the day after 9/11, charity triumphed over anger. And everybody came together, and the president touched on this. But it didn't matter your skin color, your gender, your political affiliation, your religion. Everybody, you know, they keep saying, well, everybody was an American. No, everybody became a human being. And it took an act of devastation and terrorism to make us all become human beings. This pandemic should have made us all become human beings again and treat each other with empathy and sympathy and, you know, love thy neighbor, help thy neighbor. Neighbor can't go to the store, bring neighbor food. It's that simple.
Talk about that more, John, because you have described before a fear in your fight with coronavirus unlike anything you have ever experienced since 9/11. What do you want people to know about your experience there?
Well, it's real. It's not a hoax. I spent 11 weeks in the hospital when I got injured after 9/11, and I was scared. And I was never scared before that or after that in my whole life, ever. Nothing scares me. I'm not even afraid of dying. But when I got COVID and pneumonia, I was scared. I could not breathe. I was gasping for my life. And I pray that nobody ever has to go through that again. And I'm here. I'm lucky. And you know the old saying, you know, everybody says it, and I've said it a million times today. It's the old saying, you only live once. That's not true. You only die once. You live every day.
I want to intervene on what this gentleman's talking about right here. I've seen him quite a few times towards being an activist of the 9/11 fund. That means so much to a great deal of people who have suffered the aftermath of what had occurred after 9/11. This individual is not lucky. This individual is blessed. And he's blessed by the Heavenly Father towards still being able to be alive and to tell his testimony to this very day. It's the same way with any of us that are still living, that has went through horrible events, maybe not quite as horrible as 9/11, but it's the same way with any of us that knows that our lives could have been taken for whatever reason, but yet now we're still left here to tell our tale, to tell our story. It's not a matter of luck. We as evangelical Christians do not believe in luck. We believe in fate. What is to be will be, and if it's not meant to be, it won't be. And if it wasn't meant for this individual to be sitting there right now telling us his side of the story about not only what went on during and in 9/11, but also the day after, and also with the COVID-19 coronavirus disease, if it wasn't meant for him to be on TV and talk to us right now about those things, we would not be hearing from this gentleman. So please keep in mind as we go through this somber moment of remembrance, because it's not a celebration at all. You don't celebrate something this horrific, this horrifying. You do it only as a remembrance of those who did in fact sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice during this event. And there's no doubt that the event that the president was at pertaining to those in Pennsylvania was probably some of the most heroic people that you and I will ever become acquainted with in our lifetime, because I truly believe that if it wasn't for them conglomerating together in bringing down not just the terrorist, but bringing down that airplane, that it's a very strong possibility that on 9/11 we would have seen that airplane go through the White House, similar towards how we seen 2 other airplanes go through the Twin Towers and also go through the Pentagon. That would have been one of the most horrifying scenes on the world stage, to have seen an airplane go through the White House. So as far as I'm concerned, those individuals should be wrapped in glory and God's love from now until the end of existence, because of what that they was willing to do together. I believe their last words was, let's roll with it. I believe was their memento, let's roll with it, or something to that degree. In other words, they know the challenges that was ahead of them as they was being held hostage in an airplane with a bunch of Saudi Arabian terrorists. And to this day, it still petrifies my feelings of the unjust due that had been committed that day towards a group of people that is still running at large, who has never paid for what they done to the American people pertaining to the Saudi Arabian people that we know. That was the mass majority of those that was trained to fly an airplane, but wasn't none of them trained to land an airplane. It is so petrifying to my very inner core as an American to think that true justice has never been unleashed upon a society of a group of people that caused so much harm and so much grief to so many people on this day.
And I hope everybody in America takes today and starts living every day forward, because, man, we take things for granted that can be gone like that.
Immediately, yes.
Your message, John, I think is so important for people to hear, not just today, but every day. I know that tomorrow your foundation is planning a special tribute to 9/11 survivors who have also been battling with the coronavirus. Can you just, before we wrap up here, talk about your mindset going into these tributes, not just for the rest of the day today, but tomorrow as well?
You know, tomorrow, I built a park on Long Island called the 9/11 Responders Remembrance Park, and every year we do a reading of the names of those we lose in a calendar year from a 9/11 related illness. Tomorrow we'll add 170 names to our wall, which has about 1,700 names on it now. And their names will be read out loud, followed by the ringing of the bell and a flyover. You know, I've been to 186 funerals. Before 9/11, I went to one. That was for my grandfather. Out of those 186 funerals, I had to pay for 9 of them because families couldn't afford to bury their loved ones. We cannot continue to call ourselves the greatest nation in the world if we cannot take care of our greatest resources, which are firefighters, police officers, EMS. And next Tuesday, Jon Stewart and I will go back to Washington, D.C. and introduce legislation for those affected by the burn pits in Afghanistan and other places of the Mideast. And these are ordinary people that did extraordinary things that protected us 24/7. And we continue to fail our nation's heroes. And that's just not my norm. I will never conform to what everybody else has a new norm.
John Feal, I can't thank you enough for being with us and sharing your thoughts with us this morning of all mornings. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, John.
Thank
and
you
as
for
John
having
and
me.
all of
It
us
means a lot.
reflect on this day, every American thinks back to where they were, thinks back to 19 years ago, how they felt as they watched those attacks unfold. This is especially true for a lot of people in New York, many of whom witnessed that terror firsthand. NBC News' Harry Smith is one of those New Yorkers.
was all just too much. What we were watching couldn't be real. Our minds, our souls refused to believe it. The enormity of it all. The shock soon turning to sorrow. As we realized so many people would not be going home to their loved ones that night. The grief was uncontainable. The missing, the unaccounted for, their pictures and the pleas that accompanied them were cries for help.
He's my best friend in the world. He was a great dad and hoping he could still be a great dad. If not, we love you, Roland.
And expressions of hope that somehow, some way, the unthinkable had not happened. There was heroism in the air that day. The way the passengers and crew refused to let the terrorist turn a plane above Pennsylvania into a bomb. The way so many people in the World Trade Center helped their friends and colleagues and complete strangers to safety. The way the firefighters, law enforcement, and EMTs gave little pause to entering buildings they knew they'd never escape. We were numb for weeks. The pictures from the Pentagon, the fire there that took days to extinguish, the hollowed out field in Shanksville where United Flight 93 was forced to the ground. The pile, the search for survivors, for remains. They said the air there was safe. Those who were there knew that couldn't be true. We watched a lot of funerals and learned over time the life stories of those we lost. And as the accounts of selflessness poured forth, we were inspired. We were in awe. How, we wondered, could they have done what they did? As heinous as those acts of terrorism were, what resulted was the opposite, we think, of what was intended.
I don't think America had never experienced this type of evil. The onslaught that was thrown in the American people's faces until 9/11, whenever they realized, my God, we really do have an enemy overseas that is out to take us all under. To this day, my heart goes out to those who was in harm's way pertaining to the great Satan, if you want to call him great. I don't call Satan great, but the evil demonic Satan that is still at large, that masterminded 9/11 to bring so much pain, misery, and horror to so many innocent lives that day, that changed America, that has solely been responsible towards putting us where we are today in the year 2020, 19 years to this day, in seeing how many people's lives has been affected in a negative way. Yes, there was good to come out of 9/11. There's always a silk to the darkness. But to think that it took this to alert the American people of the enemy that is out to kill, steal, and destroy, it's just absolutely mind-boggling to me. As we continue to remember this day with tears in my eyes, remembering where I was, what I was doing, how that I first was exposed to this type of grief and horror, let us never, ever forget the spirit of the American spirit. That though They may have injured us. They have not defeated us. And we will never be defeated as Americans, no matter what entity, no matter what dark, deep entity that thinks that they want to bring the American people and the American way of life down, will never succeed in their attempts. Because we have something that most nations only desire to have, which is that brotherhood, that sisterhood of loving thy neighbor even as thyself. Something that they don't teach in the book of the Quran, but it's only taught in the King James Version.
As heinous as those acts of terrorism were, what resulted was the opposite, we think, of what was intended. For a good long while afterwards, it felt like we were a United States. It was a great thing. The idea that there's more that unites us than divides us.
God bless America.
So as the bells ring this morning, as prayers are offered and names read, perhaps we'll all do well to stop and listen and remember.
And we will never forget. That does it for us this hour of MSNBC Live. My colleague Craig Melvin has more after the break.
Thanks again to my viewers. I haven't been outside yet. I'm fixing to go out there and bring our American flag half-staff in honor of the 9/11 victims. If there's ever been a time pertaining to all this craziness going on, pertaining to the protesters, 9/11, the COVID-19, and as well as the onslaught of people shooting and killing each other and looting and rioting and the fires out west and the hurricanes and the floods and the storms. If there's ever been a time that we needed to pray and uplift each other and try to remain devoted to our holy, righteous God, I truly believe that today marks that anniversary. Thank you for allowing for us to be a part of your lives here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, in issuing out our message to the general public pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ. Good luck to all of us as we merge into the future. And may God bless each and every one of us. And may God bless America. Shalom.